What's going on? What's going on? What's happening, guys? We back. We are back. We are back. We are back. We are back. Want to make sure that I'm not peeking. Cool. What's going on, guys? It's another week. Another week for the stream. I'm your host, EA Green, the CEO and owner of the Open Media Agency, a full-service agency focusing on micro-content, virtual events, and lead generation. It's another week. I got Tony in the background. What's going on, Tony?
Yo.
How was your week, man?
Been pretty good. Can't complain.
Man, it is already Wednesday. I feel like for the longest time I couldn't really keep up with the days because like they all kind of blurred together, but now they're just kind of like, and speed back up, and I'm just like, wow, like where did all that time go? But all right, for everybody here who's here for the live, we are here to talk about building community, something that is huge on this platform. If you're watching everything on Twitch for the full experience, but if you are on YouTube or Facebook, it's still all in all, like all the same, and something that we should all be paying attention to, right? And about how important it is for you to build to build a community and not just a customer base. And ultimately, I'm hoping that we can have a discussion here today to talk about how your community can be your customer base, but your customer base doesn't necessarily mean that it's your community. What's going on, guys? Thank you. You didn't have to. I know. I really appreciate y'all. Okay. Please stop. Okay. Hey, guys. It's EA again. Here for another week. All right. Again, we're going to be talking about community. For some reason, it's been on my heart. It's been on my brain. And I kind of took the reins on this. Tony doesn't really know where I'm going to go with this one today, but he believes that I won't let us down. And if anything, of course, goes wrong on the stream, blame Tony. Joking. But if anything goes well, please blame me. But so today I want to talk about community building. Tony, what's your thoughts on building community and how important it is? What's your early thoughts on this?
I feel like we should start with what community actually means.
Okay, so what does community mean? So for me, basically, community is synonymous for like your tribe, right? People who are similar in terms of like-minded individuals or a like-minded group of people that share the same interest. But I think you have to be careful, right? Because you don't want to have, what they call groupthink, right? You don't want to find that tribe, find those group of people that you talk to, and you're surrounded by a whole bunch of like yes men or yes women or, yes to them or whatever, right? You don't really want that in your space. But when in terms of building community, you want people that you can be able to actually share your thoughts with, right? Be able to exchange ideas and actually be open to, like, if they don't agree with you, should be able to, to give their opinion, for the greater good, right? Because everyone should be able to, share their opinion. But I feel like nowadays, in today's world, especially when it comes to marketing, like, it is so crucial to have your community back your company, back your brand, rather than just finding customers, right? Because essentially you are in a relationship with all your customers. And I think it really it boils down to like just even what you call them, right? And when I say call them, like here at the Open Media Agency, we don't really refer to customers as customers, we refer to them as clients. because in my opinion, customers are one and done, where clients come back for repeat business, right? That's more of an established relationship, something that goes for a longer period of time. And ultimately, like, we want you to feel like you are having a next level experience while working with us. And that's why we always refer to our clients as clients and not as customers. Or you might hear me mention consumers when I'm speaking to like the general public, because I want to give you the ability to decide if you're going to call them clients or customers or whatever. You know, you might say business partners in some cases, but when it comes to, and again, building community, right? You want to make sure that you can have a common ground that you have with these individuals or this group of individuals, so that they know like what your brand stands for, right? You can have a quality product, you can have a dope service, but if you don't stand for anything, you'll fall for anything. That's a great quote. I believe that's by Dr. Martin Luther King, excuse me. But that's something that, you know, everyone should really kind of keep in mind when it comes to, you know, building up like your business or building your brand, so that you can have and create more longevity rather than anything. Does that help, Tony?
Yep. So I guess now, what does community mean from a business standpoint? So I kind of get I understand the general idea of community, but what does that mean as a business or brand?
So what that means for a business or brand, right, is that I honestly believe that without community, like a community is kind of like what helps build the circulation, right? So back when I was in undergrad, one of the key factors that I heard that just made so much sense to me is that when someone has a great experience, right? And this is about 12 years ago, right? When someone has a great experience, they typically tell between 5 to 7 people about that experience. But when someone has a detracted experience, like, or a horrible experience, or something that's not so pleasant, they typically tell 9 to 11 people. But now when it comes to the digital age, you know, everyone's online, all that good stuff. I'm sure that almost doubles, maybe triples, depending on how big someone's like following is. So ultimately, like, I think when you build community, you have a higher chance to build more loyal individuals to what you have going on. All right. And that is so important when you are especially in a business like growing, right? You are in a closed space or within a small space of people that, you know, are going to be purchasing something from you. And you want to make sure that they can actually be someone that will actually want to speak your high praises to other people. You know, like we have, you know, especially, you know, in some cases, like a lot of companies have to incentivize people to do that, right? They have to have the loyalty programs or the referral bonuses and stuff like that. But, you know, we've been able to thrive so much off of word of mouth. And that doesn't happen because we treat them as customers. Like, we don't treat them like a transaction. We treat them like they're a part of the family. We treat them like they are one of us, right? We want to essentially treat them with an experience like, I forget, like, who mentions it? Airbnb. Like, they have this whole concept of like building 11-star experience, right? Where essentially, you know, when you have an Airbnb, you can give someone like, you know, 5 stars and stuff like that. But they actually did exercises trying to determine what does it look like if you gave someone a 6-star experience, or 7, 8, 9, 10, even an 11-star, right? Which means just going completely above and beyond, which then allows them to determine, like, you know, how their product roadmap goes or things of that nature and all that stuff, right? Like, it takes all those different things into account. So this is one of those situations that when you build community, it really allows you to be able to like kind of share those ideas and be able to like create almost kind of like a pot of people where they can feel comfortable to like share their experiences or even give you suggestions on how to improve your product or your service or things of that nature. I mean, I don't know about you, but for me in particular, we use certain programs like StreamYard. That's not really something to really hide, I guess, right? But I am in that community group on Facebook, and they drop gems all the time, right? In terms of like how if you have like a specific issue, right, with something, like you can put it out there, and then someone within that space, because most of them are producers, will say, this is how I do it, or this is how I do it. And think about it. Like, you ever been to a place where you try to do something and you kind of said, you know what, I don't want to do it anymore because I can't figure it out. But imagine if YouTube didn't exist. Imagine if you can only speak to other people who own this product or have used this service in order to get their help, right? Because now they're going to help, these other clients that are out there are going to help you as another client before me as the business owner could potentially get to it, because I may be busy working on something else. So it's just one of those people, like, those situations where having a community, if done right, you have additional client relationship managers, you got, tech, troubleshooters, you got salesmen, like you got all these different pieces that you really can't get out of someone that you're just trying to say, hey, like, I have this, buy this, and then they go about their day. So I'm just gonna take a look before we kind of go further. I want to take a look at the chat, see who's in here. All right, so I see Get You a Res is in here. What's going on? I see the homie, Big Legend. You can come in here every Tuesday, and you can go to Now Open for Club Legend if you are new to the stream, right? Club Legend is our weekly kind of like getting the week off started off right, doing it on Tuesdays and stuff like that. And Get You a Res is the host of the Textually Active podcast and the host of the Text Thread, which is a new show that will be airing every Friday here on the Open Media Agency's channel on Twitch and on their YouTube channel and things of that nature, where they kind of cover all the different topics that take place over the week. And they had their first episode last Friday, and I am so proud of how that worked out and how that came out. And they're probably a good example about why building community is so important too. Now I think about it. But looks like you got something on your mind, Tony. What you got?
So I kind of essentially just want to talk to you and kind of pick your brain on like what actually building a community means. Like, I understand the definition, and I'm sure other people do, but it's like, what does that mean for a particular brand? Like, what? Because necessarily what I'm trying to get to is not about the business or brand. So you mentioned earlier about common interests, so I kind of want you to elaborate on that more so people can actually understand the community and not rather like
the benefits of it all.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me start here. StreamYard, you talked about they have a community, right? On Facebook, yes.
Right. But the community, as you kind of stated, it's not necessarily about StreamYard, right? It's different producers.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's StreamYard's group, right? That is, it's labeled like the StreamYard like Facebook community, right? And it is assumed that everyone who's there either has an account or has used StreamYard before, right? Because why would you go? You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
You don't really hear about it until you really are kind of like within their funnel, right? Within their universe.
Yeah, I understand.
And, they do certain things, like people don't go in there and promote themselves all the time, right? Like, a lot of people are in there, and I've seen, you've seen people like ask questions about like how to do certain things, or like, if you have the Rodecaster and, like how to connect different things, or how to like troubleshoot different scenarios, or, hey, here's a common thing that I've had, and I want to see if anyone else has had this issue too.
Right. Exactly.
Excuse me.
So you just said exactly what I was trying to highlight. So it's not necessarily about StreamYard.
No, not
it's
at all.
About it does go through StreamYard because it's a platform, obviously.
Right.
But the community side of it they have common interests as far as streaming, producing,
Yes.
troubleshooting, whatever, right?
Right.
So I kind of want you to elaborate on that some more.
Okay. So yeah. So I mean, the way that I would kind of look at it is like when you have your community, like you want to find like the common ground of like what you guys are kind of interested in, right? Like that might be directly tied to potentially using your product, right? So for instance, if, we as the agency do not have a community group, right? We try, or we're in the process of fostering this community by creating content through, our normal social media presence and things of that nature. And then if you join our newsletter, right, where we give basically free game, which I guess is the official name of this segment now. If you guys haven't noticed, it's called Free Game. So we, provide free game, talk about different concepts when it comes to marketing that, some people have to pay for, right, to do that, right? And essentially, you want to find that common ground of like, hey, like if we decided to create a Facebook group, it might be the concept of like actually creating content, right? And like what that actually means and like how people are going about it, and then, sharing the content that in which you make and stuff like that, right? So we have our whole situation that we did with the Light Cube, which is still around, right? And that'd be something where it's like, hey, like everyone share the different projects or these different things that you're doing to be able to make sure that you can kind of stand out, right? So we would try to find a common ground of like, and give it like a dope name, like, like content pushing the needle or something like that. And, find people who are within that space that, have their own, people who are pioneers, people who are, in their own business trying to create these different products, and then they kind of go within that space. Oh my God. You're all right, guys. All right, we're back, guys. If you're in the comments, man, please clip that, because that happens. Like I don't understand why my this desk is so anti when it comes to this microphone arm, this boom stand, and I just feel like it's so secure, but then all of a sudden, like out of nowhere, it just says, you know what, I'm out. But all right, so where were we before that whole fiasco?
So essentially, kind of what you were moving towards was that community kind of puts your brand at the center, essentially, and you kind of the interests kind of work around that center point.
So I wouldn't necessarily say that your brand is at the center. I would think that our interests are at the center, right? Like so like in particular, like I know we mentioned StreamYard, but it's like because they have a product. You get what I'm saying? So I would probably say, like, you see, like, when there's a lot of service providers, I think what happens, like, you'll see them have like campaigns, right? So like you can imagine that, like, I think I seen this yesterday actually, that American Express and I feel like I'm dropping a whole bunch of stuff, right? But like American Express had built a community about like kind of financial freedom, right? And like financial literacy, because we know that is a huge like issue that is out there, right? There's a lack of financial education, in our regular, school system and things of that nature. And there's a lot of things that we kind of have to rely on other people to do. And it's kind of hard for it to be from, people who are within that space, right? To kind of like, how can you learn about credit if your family doesn't have good credit, or, it's something that's kind of new within that space? That makes sense. And believe it or not, like, and it's funny, like, cause like when you kind of do things like that, like you would think that for a credit card company, like that would be something bad to do, right? Because it's like banks make money for you by you paying interest, right? But my thing is like you know that if, unfortunately, it's like yes, as a bank, I do want you to pay interest, but if you can't afford to use your card ever again because you max it out, then that's a big issue for you as a client, right? And ultimately, like you know, that's something that you kind of want to be able to like kind of have that balance between, you know, what they kind of say, like you're kind of, you know, selling ammunition to both sides, right? Like you're kind of supplying and like you're creating the issue and providing the solution at the same time, right? But by, you know, kind of leveraging these other individuals that kind of help you, provide you with a little bit more information, like really kind of helps push that narrative in the forefront, because now I could potentially sell you more on the back end, because you now, whenever you think about financial literacy, you might think of American Express compared to someone else. But one of the things I kind of want to talk to you about, Tony, is so they say that with millennials and Zoomers, right? Particularly, you see this. I've seen this conversation about it when it came to like getting a job, right? And they were saying that brands need to have some type of social impact, right, for people to feel comfortable to actually like want to be employed there. But now you see things like that when it comes to other facets of like business as a whole, right? Because there are things that take place outside of the world of business that help really drive conversation. And you have to decide which side of history you really want to be on. Do you want to be able to make a statement that really kind of helps you stand out, so that, you know, and be okay with being held accountable for it? Or do you want to say nothing and look like you're complicit with the whole situation? So I'm curious to see what your, you know, in terms of like social justice, or not necessarily social justice, but like social issues, and how companies kind of involve in that, and why you may think that it would help or not help the brand.
That's a good question.
So again, the question is more about having brands talk about some of these higher, you know, a little more heavier issues.
Right.
Right. Because, you know, I can talk to say, hey, like I care about, you know, financial literacy. So now I have programs and things about financial literacy. Right. That's not as heavy as, say, you know, you have situations like, you have like not situations, but initiatives like Black Lives Matter or Stop Asian Hate, or, you know, the Me Too movement and things of that nature. Like, I feel like there is a messy or kind of common ground that's like, hey, if you're not careful, you know, it might mess you up, right?
Yeah, it definitely is one of those. I guess you can call it a slippery slope, because the way I see it is you can be too out and open about a certain subject and lose more people than you gain, if that makes sense. So politically, of course, this past campaign, there were a lot of companies who voted, well, I won't say voted, a lot of companies who invested in a particular candidate, and a lot of people weren't feeling that, right?
Right.
So they lost a lot of people, but at the same time, it's like you also have to think about the long term. Like there are a number of people who don't care. There are a number of people who do care. So it's kind of one of those things where it's up to you as a business or brand. It does affect reputation. That's one of the things you got to think about. And I mean, that goes back into money essentially. So I don't agree or disagree with any of it. I guess it just depends on how you actually go about it, because there have been brands like in the midst of the Black Lives Matter, of course, brands that have posted just a black post just to kind of get on the wave, right, in so sense, and people can see through stuff like that. So you kind of want to just make sure that you are genuine with how you move.
Right. So it basically is like it's about authenticity.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So this was a very interesting topic, right? Because there's a disconnect when, or in a sense of when you feel like you should be compelled to say something, right? Because that's how you genuinely feel, or if it's like you're just following the train, right? Because I am of the belief that you do not have to address every single thing, right? Because just because you don't say it out loud does not mean that you do not care about it either, right? And I feel like that's something that you understanding like your why and who your audience is. Like you want to be able to make sure that you can, make sure that you don't alienate any particular potential client that you might have out there. So for instance, last year when kind of at the heart of the whole like the George Floyd murder and things of that nature, like I felt compelled, I needed to say something, right? And that's something that made sense for us, right? Because essentially we are a black owned business. We have, essentially it could have been me essentially. And that's one of those things that, in that particular like vein, I needed it to be understood that, hey, that we're going to have a stand that basically for any hate like things or any, violence against people who look like me, like it won't be tolerated at all. Right. But in the same token, like I understood it's like, hey, like, when Stop Asian Hate came and stuff like that, like I felt the same way. Right. But to me, it did not feel authentic because like, unfortunately, like I'm not saying unfortunate, but I am not of, Asian descent. Right. So I can be boisterous of like, hey, like this is how we kind of feel about it. Cause like it's about, the intoleration of hate as a whole. But, with this, like, I'm going to have to play the background, right? Because I need to make sure that I can support in other ways, not necessarily trying to be like a pick me and, be in front of all that stuff.
Right.
Right. But one of those situations, like, for instance, like where we're at, right, we deal with everyone's First Amendment, like, right of free speech. Because we deal with, different clientele that have different, views about politics, about religion, about anything, right? And it is very, crucial to show like the way that you kind of handle your work and the things that you kind of put out there, like how that can also be an indirect way to kind of build community, right? Because there is one of those situations that it's one of those situations where you say, hey, look, like we don't tolerate like hate speech at all, but I don't care if you're black, blue, or brown, or you are, which way you voted at the election, or if you voted at all, right? If you have a story to tell, right, you should be allowed to tell that story, right? But we also have that that responsibility to make sure that we are inclusive of how we actually allow that to be told, right? Because you get into the whole parameters of like what we are about, who owns what, all that good stuff, right? But at the end of it all, like, because it can be a potentially way to kind of like show us what we do, and then essentially like that might have that shadow cast over what we're essentially working on. All right, so I was kind of looking up some stuff when it came to building community, right? And essentially something that kind of kept sticking out to me was like, your community can be your customer base, but your customer base doesn't necessarily mean that it's your community, right? And I want to talk about like how, some of the benefits of like building that community and how you can kind of like mess it up if you're not doing it properly, right? And for us in particular, is one of the main things is like how do you, like when you are marketing yourself, marketing your business, it really determines like how you actually are putting yourself out there. Like what type of content are you putting out there, Like, what story are you telling? What story are you sharing? What value are you providing to people so that they can decide, hey, you know what? Like, I agree and I want to be a part of this, right? And it's one of those situations where if you have a product or a service, like, people know that you're selling a service, especially if they're within that small, like, community or small tribe like circle that you have within your social media. But if you are only trying to sell, like, that's going to show that to them, I'm not your community, because, like, I'm not in a community of salesmanship. You know what I'm saying? Like, I am in there for community, for relationship building. And one of the main ways that you guys can actually, do this on a time-to-time basis is actually kind of provide, more value in terms of what you do on a day-to-day basis. So the best way that we decide to do it is, like, we kind of figure out what is your like, that avatar that you have for that client that you have, the typical client that you want. How can you teach your potential audience how to become a client for you, right? And basically taking that information and be able to break it down into bite-sized pieces in order for you to essentially groom them over time, which then, primes them to say, hey, you know what? Why don't you join my email community where we talk about these different things, and where we're going to continue to have more in-depth conversations so that we can, kind of be on that same page. So, Tony, what do you think about the idea of kind of like continue to provide free game to people?
The idea of it?
Yes.
I mean, essentially, it's essential nowadays, especially with how social media is moving.
So, I'm trying to think. Do you have an example, or is anybody out there that you see that just like, I like how they do this? Like, in terms of like providing game and, providing value, in terms of what they are potentially doing. Yeah, 1 second, guys. We'll be right back. Okay. All right. So where we left off at, let me kind of reset. All right. So where we left off at was basically we're going to talk about like why providing value and basically giving out free game is like kind of essential to you establishing and building the community. All right. So for us at the agency, what we decide to do is we have an idea of what our typical client will look like. Like, we have, avatars. We have 5 avatars that we essentially go after on a consistent basis to be able to approach them about providing services to them by the agency. And we know when you are ready to start doing some work with us, we know that there's a lot of education that might take place, because it is not simple, or it may not be as simple as just turning on a light and turn on your phone, depending on how much you want to actually produce something for your brand or for your business, right? So a lot of the things what we do, we say, hey, like, here are all the things that you need to know, all right? And then we essentially set it up so that we can actually break it down piece by piece, right, to be able to make content to push out there. And ultimately, in some cases, the way we kind of look at it is like, some of it we probably should not give out, but I think if you have a differentiator that really makes you stand out, some of the things that are common knowledge, like, you shouldn't gatekeep that, in my opinion. So, Tony, what do you think about in terms of like how people may gatekeep some different information or some different plugs, for a different free game about how to do certain things? Yes. What do you think about people that gatekeep?
I mean, essentially, they don't grow as much as the ones who don't. I think it's kind of obvious, especially like, I think the original question you asked was, I think you asked a person that I like content from? Or
Yes.
something like that? Prince Donnell on Instagram, posting like 7 times a day.
Shout out to Prince Donnell.
Yeah.
He is consistent, and I'll give you that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are kind of. I can understand why people want to hold back some information that they know, but I think with today's age and now that information is just all the way out there, you can find out anything. It's like it might as well be me, if that makes sense.
Right.
And you also want to create that like trust factor. Like you want people to be able to know you, not like you, and trust you. And at the end of the day, like they have to remember you. So
right,
that's the best way to do it.
Right. So like I believe like what that does, right, when there's tons of people out there that are trying to sell products or services. There are a lot of gurus out there, right, and a lot of people who do not actually have a track record of doing these things. And I feel like you notice that the people who do have a track record are the ones that that are not gatekeepers of the information, because they know that, like, I know that I'm gonna kill it, and I know that no matter, say if you make cupcakes or cakes and stuff like that, like, yeah, like you might have secret ingredients of how to do it, but the sauce is forever. You know what I'm saying? Like you can't like be in a place where you're just so held up tight about the information that you have, right? If you're not willing to share it, then like how are people going to know what you can potentially do, right? Like people, like, consumers or clients, like we have the yearning to like always know. Like we want to know so much information. We want to know a little bit about a lot of things. And if you are able to share that education factor, like of how you can kind of put them on to certain things, like people will remember that. And they'll remember that, hey, when I try to figure this out, like I feel like there's, 3 things that typically happens like within that space, right? So you might teach someone how to do certain things, but I think 7 out of 10 people are probably not going to do anything with it. Right, they're gonna like have it as like a nice to know. It's something that I remember, right? And then you might have another 2 people that will try to do something with it and it won't do it, and then they stop, right? And then what happens is that they try it and they say to themselves like, hey, it didn't work out, but I then remember that EA or Tony or someone is the person who put me on to this, right? And then now I'm gonna reach out to them, and that can be a potential customer or a potential client or consumer for you, right? And then there's that last person that may actually take the information that you teach them, right, within that community space, right, and actually use it and not need you at all, right? But if you think about it, like that person was probably never going to do business with you to begin with, right? And that's just kind of the way it goes. And in my case, the way how that kind of looks like is like that person can be a potential employee, a partner, a contractor. Like that can be someone that you can potentially do business with to build together, right? And ultimately, like, especially depending on where you're at, like you might have like opportunities where it's like, hey, like I need to do a little bit more, and now I know this other chef because they've done some work with me over the past, right? And we've been able to build trust and build credibility with each other because I've shared my information and I've shared and we've exchanged these ideas, and now we're in a place where, let's make this money together. And I feel like that is so crucial,
Yeah. I mean, I know we're not technically going this route, but it kind of goes into just having a scarcity mindset.
Ooh. Okay. You gonna take it there, huh?
Guess we're going there.
So yeah, I mean, I think we can definitely go into a little bit deeper about it. I think that'd be a good subject, but let's kind of like graze over it a little bit, right?
Gotcha.
All right. So you mentioned the scarcity mindset, and I'm definitely going to tie this back into building community because I feel like it's all a part of it. All right. So when it comes to having the scarcity mindset, like that's a mindset that someone might have, or a group of people might have, that says that there's only a finite amount of resources, right? That's like the simplest way for me to put it. That's someone who feels like that if you are in the agency game, that there's literally only 10 contracts out there that that's the only thing that's available, and I want to take all 10 by myself, and I will, lie, kick and scream to make sure that everyone else is sabotaged within that space, right? And I can understand that, right? And in the sense of, depending on, 'cause I used to have it, in my opinion, right? And I felt like I had it because I was operating from a place of like necessity. Like I felt like I need this to survive, right? And if I don't, then I'm gonna be SOL. I'm gonna have to close my doors and things of that nature, right? But when you operate in a place of giving first, providing first, like I feel like that stuff comes back in abundance all the time, right? Like, I shouldn't mention this because it's not solid yet, but I mean, having the abundance mindset and providing value first turned into a text message that I received a couple of weeks ago. It was like, hey, we got a gig that's coming your way, right? We're waiting for the go ahead, but this is coming your way. And I felt like, that says a lot. Like that says a lot. That says a lot about the trust and the building that takes place, the relationship building that takes place, and the commonality that me and that individual have, where they championed me and the agency outside of, like within that room, and operating out of a place of like me, or no, it's all about me, right? Will close those doors on you forever. So, Tony, have you felt like you've ever had the scarcity mindset?
Honestly, no.
Okay.
Yeah. I feel like I've always been a place of just kind of how my personality is. I'm always someone else before me. If that makes sense? Mm-hmm. And that is a gift and a curse. But as far as the mindset part of it, I have always understood that like there's enough out there for all of us, no matter what we're doing. And kind of learned it very early on, before I even got into entrepreneurship, before I even became a creative, and just, yeah. So it's just always been here for me.
I mean, and the thing is, I feel like the scarcity mindset doesn't always necessarily mean someone who's like on your same side, right? Like it doesn't mean like another agency. Like it can come from actual potential clients or customers, right? Where, and sometimes those are individuals where you say, hey, like, the people who are hagglers, right? I think those are some of those, right? And unfortunately, someone who, like you would probably say, someone who does not know your understand your true value, right? Because all they're really worried about is like, hey, like how can I get this for the cheapest amount possible? And it's never really about you. And I feel like you can't really take that stuff like kind of personally. All right, so sorry guys, what I'm going to do is I'm making a poll right now, and I'm doing it on the fly. All right, if you guys are in the chat, I want you guys to actually take a look at this. All right, so it's about, do you have the scarcity mindset? All right, so that's out there for you guys. All right, but I think that's something that you got to really kind of like, that's something that really needs to be talked about way deeper than it actually is, like on a common day and day to day. All right, so if you're new to the stream and things of that nature, again, this is the Open Media channel. Again, this is free game happening every single Wednesday, where we're talking about different marketing and entrepreneurial tips and tricks and things of that nature. Right, I think we're kind of due for an edit stream soon, Tony. I think we talk a lot on here, but I think we got to start showing people like what we're really about. All right, and basically today what we're talking about is about why it's about building community is so important, right? And essentially, like, I kind of want to get into like the more brass tacks of it all, because I feel like building community seems very, up in the clouds and kumbaya type of situation. But like, let's talk about the real brass tacks of it all, about why that that can be such a detriment to you if you do not actually build a community for yourself, right? And one thing that in particular that you hear often but people do not pay attention to is that these platforms, right, that we actually go on and stream and post and different things every single day, we don't own these streams, right? We don't own these platforms. You have to understand that when you use something for free, right, you are the customer. Sorry, you are the product and not necessarily like the actual like user itself. Like, you know, and ultimately like terms and conditions are a thing. And most of you guys probably, you know, just clicked okay and, you know, funneled right through. Right. But it's one of those situations that if you do not build a customer base or a community around amongst yourself, if something goes wrong with your account, you get hacked, you get, you know, for whatever reason, you violate terms and conditions or something like that, how are you going to get in contact with everyone right afterwards? Right. And that is such a huge component that I feel like should scare any business owner, any brand developer, anyone, right? If you have no way to get in contact with people outside of the platform, like if something goes wrong, like what are you going to do? And like, all that work that you do to build up your followers and stuff like that, right? Like there's some of those situations where you're just like, yo, like what does that actually like do for you? And I feel like that when you are in a place, so if you basically do not have these things, right? Like essentially like you're kind of like starting from scratch every single time. Right. And, you know, and I think you should be able to do it no matter what type of product or service that you do. Right. So I see that we got Big Legend, DJ Legend in the chat, and I want to pick on him for a minute. So hopefully he doesn't hate me for this. But imagine if, you know, Big Legend, DJ Legend, right, didn't just show his ability of like how he spins, how he, you know, plays music and things of that nature, and he was not relatable. Right. And he didn't have, you know, the ability to say, hey, like, you know, I am available to actually, you know, talk to you guys outside of the platform. And I can let you know about different shows that I got going on, different things I got coming up. And ultimately, if something goes wrong, like I want to be able to talk to you to continue to establish that relationship. And I just feel like that's one of like the hugest things. And I think no matter what, if you are a business owner, if you are a content creator, like you have to own something that is yours. And ultimately the one thing that we can do from a marketing standpoint is own that email list. I'm trying to think.
Sorry,
go ahead.
Where does building a community start though? Like as a brand or business, where do you actually start building a community?
So let's say that you are an online business. Building community starts by what you post and the understanding that you give to the people who are following you, right?
So internally.
So not necessarily internally. So like my thing is like if you set the expectation that you post Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 8 a.m. or at 12 p.m. or at 3 or whatever time, right? And that is you starting to establish community, right? Because it is you starting to establish trust and credibility amongst your people, right? And if you basically stop for whatever reason, you don't necessarily lose all your trust, but now you lose that opportunity to say, hey, like I'm continuing to do the work that I said that I was going to do. Right? Like in any relationship, any friend that you have, any relative that you have, most people don't like to be lied to. Most people don't like to be, you know, kind of blow smoke. Like you don't want people who are going to not be a person of their word. And I think you start building community by actually keeping your word to what you say that you're going to do. And most times when people interact with you for the first time as a business or a brand, it's probably through your social media. So like you don't necessarily might say, hey, I'm going to post every single Wednesday or every single Friday or whatever. You do it with your actions, essentially.
So what are the steps before that? Like, not. I'm guess I'm trying to get towards within the business. If that makes sense.
Okay, I mean, do you have an example?
So like, I'm thinking more so on the lines that community doesn't necessarily like. It's not always about the customer or whoever is on the inside. Like, kind of what we were talking about earlier, as far as like brand and how they view certain social issues and things of that nature. I'm thinking that there has to be work before that, right? In order to be able to build an outside community. So I was trying to ask you, like, what does that entail inside? Like say like with their team,
okay,
and stuff around that.
okay, yeah. So that's fair. So yeah, I definitely agree with the idea that when you building community, right? Like your the atmosphere that you create within your organization, all right, like basically kind of leaks out, right? People understand, and people like the typical consumer or the typical viewer or client or customer. I believe they're way smarter or way more intelligent than like the typical consumer maybe 30, 20 years ago. Right? Because now we understand, like as a whole, like there's like things being written, things being staged. Like we kind of understand that, right? Because we see people do it similar, kind of like on a regular basis, right? And they can sniff out when what you're like pushing out there is a bunch of bull, right? Because they can tell based off of like how, say, like you have a client rep or a customer service rep, like how they interact with their people, right? And they can tell like, okay, like you can't be talking about, oh, we're here for you and we're here as a family, but then you hear about like what actually takes place after the fact, right? There's a reason why like people make jokes about McDonald's every single day about the McFlurry machine not working, right? Like I feel like that kind of goes a part of like that atmosphere of like what takes place within like the organization, right? Because if enough people around the country, say, hey, like, they know they don't really, get McFlurries on a regular basis because they know that machine is probably not working. And that's an issue. It is a organizational wide issue that something like that takes place, and that is a potential butt of the joke. And I think it's very, very important to be able to make sure that the atmosphere that you have amongst your, potential against like your employees or people who are within the organization, that everyone's kind of on the same page and that they have that same feeling when they then interact with the outside world, because they are essentially your representative. All right. So something that I've been trying to kind of find low key. Do you recall there was a young lady who was an influencer that basically only sold like a little bit of like it was like a t-shirt or some type of brand that she kind of pushed out there, and they said that she did not sell like as much as she claimed that she was supposed to sell. Do you recall that?
No.
Okay, let's see if we can find this thing. All right, let's see. So I'm trying to get this voting thing off. All right, influencer who can. So there was I'm pulling up this Insider article, right? Basically, I remember this. I don't know why I remember, like, this sticks out to me so much, but back in 2019, an Instagram star with 2 million followers couldn't sell 36 t-shirts, and a marketing expert says that her case isn't rare, right? So there was something about this story that I think there are two issues here, right? One of the primary issues that I really kind of talked about was about like fake followers and like bots and stuff like that, and why that's like, if you look at that, right? But let's be real. Like all 2 million of that person's followers were not bots. But one of the bigger issues that I saw with this when I looked at it is that the relationship between her 2 million followers and her were like there was a misalignment of what this person was trying to like do and then what they potentially try to sell. Right, because they'll say there are things like, oh, it might be issues like, about who the customer base is or who the client base is, if they're able to like purchase things on their own. And I feel like we see on a regular basis, say like on Twitch, right? Like I'm sure there are young people who are on this platform that get subs, that pay for subs, that give subs, that do all these different things on a regular basis. And they're still able to support. They still have the funds available to make a purchase. And in my particular, in this particular case, I felt like there was a huge disconnect because she did not develop a true, authentic relationship with these people, right? And this is like, and basically there was a misdirect in terms of, hey, 2 million followers mean that these people actually like me enough to want to purchase something, right? So I just found like this was so wild that she only could sell 36 shirts or 35 shirts. What do you have? This doesn't ring a bell for you, Tony, at all?
I feel like I might have heard this, but I'm not really sure.
So I feel like with her, like with this, what could have essentially potentially have changed is that I think, especially within the influencer space, is like you have to be able to show like the other side, the human side of you, right? That, if someone, they look at you because, oh, you do, makeup or, clothing or something like that, like you have to be able to show like your other interests, right? And provide true value to these people so they say, hey, you know what? Let me actually go into a little bit deeper and actually, support this person.
Do they post any pictures of the shirt? I'm curious to see. I mean, who knows? Maybe the shirts were just bad.
Let's see if we can find. Looks like they erased it.
Oh, gotcha.
Oh, man. Yeah, I don't think they even pushed them out either. Right. Yeah, 36 shirts, man. I'm not going to lie. We've had customers do but I mean, I don't want to.
Wait, is that the shirt that she's wearing? Go back up in the Instagram post.
Yeah, this looks like this is it. Yeah, that's. Oof. I mean, yeah, that's just a lot, man. It's unfortunate. But, I mean, I feel like that is something that takes place on a regular basis, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
right,
you can't just sell products nowadays.
Right, you have to be able to actually sell, like, kind of like, not necessarily more like a lifestyle, but you have to be able to sell, like, the feeling. You have to sell, like, the full experience. Like, they have to feel like when I say they, like, your consumer, your client has to understand, and they have to feel like that they are a part of this, like that this is now an extension of me because I truly believe in what this means and what this stands for. But I see that we are about to, kind of get towards the end of our, our segment for here today. So, what's on your mind, Tony? What you got?
As far as community,
yeah,
I mean, you pretty much hit everything nail on. That was the last thing I was trying to get you to get to, as far as like just community within the actual brand or business.
Okay. All right. So what I want to do is I don't want to do this for the word count. You know what I'm saying? I don't want us to drag it out if we kind of like hit everything that we're supposed to hit. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a quick break. We're just gonna recap what we discussed, and then we're gonna head right on out of here. Okay. All right. right, guys, we're back from our break, and we're gonna wrap things up. We're gonna rehash some things that we discussed, and basically we're gonna put this subject to bed, and we'll catch you guys on the flip side. All right. So again, we talked about building community and why it's so important, right? And that you should focus as a business or a brand building community through sharing a common interest or a common experience rather than what benefits you as a business owner or the brand by someone actually purchasing something, right? Because I honestly believe that when you provide free game, right, and you provide enough free game before you make a big ask, when you make said ask, it becomes a whole lot easier for your potential clients or customers or your community to then say, yes, I'm going to purchase. Right. So some of the things I want you guys to remember is some of the benefits of building a community. Right. So when it comes to, building your community, like you're essentially kind of creating almost like an extended family for your brand. Right. You're in a process of building people who are going to try to be loyal to your actual brand. Right. And if you are able to provide more more free game or allow people to be amongst people who have similar interests, it fosters people who essentially become extensions of your actual business itself, right? So for instance, we use the example of a program that we use on a consistent basis called StreamYard, where essentially in their Facebook community, what they really focus on is having people who are other producers, who are people who are designers or things of that nature, or technical producers, and have them kind of really be able to help troubleshoot things together, be able to say, hey, here's a tip of, to kind of get around, this issue or things of that nature. And then what wind up almost happens too is that, there's this whole situation where they say, hey, we're going to, at StreamYard, say, here's a new feature. Right. And we're going to post the new feature in our community first, because those are going to be the people who are going to share it. Those are going to be people who are going to use it first, and then potentially be able to say, this is why this platform is so much better than everyone else. Right. And ultimately, what things that you see often that if you build a community that really, really helps out is that you'll see people make suggestions, or you'll see businesses say, hey, provide feedback. Right now, you're actually helping mold. They're actually helping mold what you're going to build next. Like if you think about it, right? Like, you can say, hey, as the creator of, the agency or, my bakery or something of that nature, like you have a general notion of what people might like, but if you hear it directly from the person themselves that are actually your typical customer, like, wouldn't that make life so much easier? Right. So when you help build a community, like your actual community members will tell you what to sell them. Right. And it is so crucial to be able to pay attention, to provide a space that does not feel like that's something that kind of comes off more selly. Right. So some of the best practices that I want you guys to keep in mind, right, is that, when, of course, you're in the business to make money, to continue to survive, to continue to provide for your family or for the people who count on you. Right. But you want to make sure that you provide a mixture of both of these things. Like that, while it is very important for you to be able to sell to different clients, you want to be able to make sure that you can continue to provide value to them outside of the direct impact of your product or your service. Right. So, low key, I feel like within the agency space, you want to becoming almost kind of like a manager. You become like I'm nowhere near say I'm a therapist, but I've been able to talk a lot of our customers, our clients down from like wanting to give up or feeling frustrated about certain things because like it's not something that's not piecing together for them as smoothly as they wish they hoped, right? And if we did not create that sense of that atmosphere of being able to be helpful or to be a part of the experience with them, so we could potentially lose business because they're saying, like there's this lack of the providing a little bit extra, providing the that true service that says, you know what, you're here for my success. Right. So the next thing you want to do in terms of building your community. So like the way I kind of look at it is like typically we try to do between, I would say between 7 to 9 pieces of content, like in something that we pay attention to, do 7 to 9 pieces of value-based content before we try to do another call to action. Right. And there's certain stuff to say like, hey, like I feel like something different when you say, hey, if you have a newsletter, you say, hey, if you want to learn more, you can go here. Right. Rather than saying, hey, click this in order to get a coupon or to get a special offer or something of that nature. Before you make a hard ask, you have to make sure that you are, within your marketing strategy, you're providing as much value as possible. And the best way of doing this is to create a program that actually helps mold your client to the ideal client. So if you can teach them everything they need to know, like say for instance, like having microphone presence or camera presence, knowing when to look into the camera versus, if they're keeping their head down or turning their head away from the microphone, you want to be able to make sure that you can teach these small things so that when they actually come in here to actually do the work, that's not something that another piece they have to kind of go over. Right. And ultimately, one of the last pieces that you want to do when it comes to building a actual community is that you want to essentially be able to move forward when you look at your who, what, when, where, why, and how. Right. You want to be able to say, like, you want to approach it as that potential client. You want to be able to make sure that you are manufacturing an experience that you would actually want to be a part of, that you would actually want to be able to tell someone else. And I think the best example that you kind of see out there is what I mentioned earlier about Airbnb when they talk about building their 11-star experience, and about how even though you can only rate a trip 5 stars, what would basically provide you with an 11-star experience, and then you are starting to be able to build your product journey, your product development journey, or your service journey to get you to that space. Because the happier customers that you have, the more people that they'll tell, right? And again, 10 years ago, they were saying between 7 to 9 people that you'll tell once you have a good experience. But imagine if that person has 2 million followers, right? So that's it for me today. Here, thank you for, tuning in to the free game, marketing tips and entrepreneurial tips for, by me, EA Green, the CEO and owner of the Open Media Agency, the full service marketing agency focused on micro content, virtual events, and, wow, I'm like losing it. Oh, and lead generation. Wow. Like sometimes, look, I'm tired, bro. I'm sorry. And I apologize. It's something that we say so many times that you would think that I should have it tattooed. I might tattoo it right here on my forearm. That'd be kind of wild. But guys, I appreciate you. I want, if you enjoyed what we had here, you can come, find us on other social media platforms. Again, you see like the openmedia.agency on Facebook and on Instagram, Open Media Agency on Twitter, and the Open Media Agency on YouTube. So the next thing you'll see from our channel is on Friday, you will have the text thread by Textually Active, where they're going to be talking about all the different things that take place that you and your friends know you talked about during your text thread throughout the week. And again, it is super fun. It is, talking about different events that take place. You hear some unique perspectives from the hosts, Rez and Mizi of the Textually Active podcast, where they have a podcast that comes out every Tuesday. And then I know we missed out on Club Legend yesterday, but we will be back in full effect next Tuesday with Now Open with Club Legend. Again, guys, I appreciate you, and we'll catch you guys on the other side. Peace.